Now I am going to introduce our first speaker, Clancy Cavnar. She received a doctorate in clinical psychology from JFK University in California with a dissertation on gay and lesbian people's experience with ayahuasca. Clancy is also about to publish 3 books with Bia Labate: Ayahuasca, Shamanism in the Amazon and Beyond, Prohibition, Religious Freedom and Human Rights, Regulating Traditional Drug Use, and the Therapeutic Use of Ayahuasca. The title of her speech today is An Examination of Psychological Healing with Ayahuasca. Please welcome Clancy Cavnar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and my talk, she just said, is on ayahuasca and mental health. I'm co-editor of these books, so I'm not a, did research on ayahuasca and mental health in my dissertation, which was on gay people and ayahuasca, but this is more based on reading that I did for the books that I've been editing in general, and also for my dissertation. Okay, how does ayahuasca affect mental health? It acts on consciousness in ways not accounted for by Western medicine or psychology. It elevates mood and enhances creativity, provides insight into problems in relationships, changes perceptions of identity, and acts on addiction. So all of these claims have all been backed by research. No, so I'm going to begin talking about positive psychology, which is the branch of psychology that doesn't address abnormal psychology or trauma or problems. It focuses on the positive things, things like courage or compassion, things that we like to enhance in people. And ayahuasca seems to have the ability to enhance the aspects of positive psychology in people, even people who don't have problems. Improvements in one study that was done by Janine Schmidt were found in, number 1, a change in health behaviors, including in diet. Participants often give up alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, and other addictions. Enhanced clarity, recognition, and sensibility. Increased physical well-being. Energy, power, and strength. Better coping with problems and daily hassles. Confidence and tranquility. A renewed sense of happiness, love, and joy. A change of life orientation, sometimes including embracing non-materialistic values. And improved social competencies. So these are all things that people who drank ayahuasca in their study reported as a result of their use. When talking about research with ayahuasca, it's important to remember that most ayahuasca research has in fact been done on mentally healthy people, because the groups that give ayahuasca to people screen out people with mental problems. So you're not going to find out, except by accident, how ayahuasca affects psychotic people. So, like I said, it's limited to people who don't have some of the problems that are excluded, and the main one is a history of psychosis. Ayahuasca is prohibited in several countries, so the research there can't be carried out, or has to be carried out with a lot of trouble and permissions. And Brazil is actually doing the most, and it's because they have the best laws allowing research on ayahuasca. And also to remember that mental health is a flexible concept. It changes within cultures, and the causes are culturally determined. So what we think is mentally healthy, other people might not think so. Jace Calloway did some research on rats who were fed ayahuasca regularly and found that the body, when ayahuasca increases the sites where serotonin can be received. So when the ayahuasca is not in the system, the body is encouraged to make more serotonin, which is one of the things that antidepressants work by doing. So, and repeated doses of it will create pathways in the brain that are permanent. A study of a sample of regular drinkers of ayahuasca in the UDV. And the UDV, I should explain, is a church from Brazil that uses ayahuasca on a regular basis in a ritual setting. It's a kind of a Christian setting. It's shown regular use of ayahuasca in the União de Vegetal. It's shown platelet serotonin uptake sites increased in drinkers of ayahuasca by as much as 25%. And there isn't anything else, including the antidepressants that we have, that has such a strong effect. Regular ayahuasca use results in long-term modulation of serotonin systems in the brain. I'm going to briefly talk about inside the brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, and if you have questions, you should consult the literature. But just to briefly say that ayahuasca activates the neocortex, which is where we perceive, reason, and make decisions. Ayahuasca also affects the amygdala, which is a depository for emotional memories, especially traumatic or significant ones. And it activates the insular cortex, which is the bridge between emotional impulses and decision making. So it affects all of these, and it accentuates them. Thinking, if you've had an ayahuasca experience or just thinking about what it might be like, imagining that all these aspects are interacting, it's not specific to just one spot. And it's to some of the ones that are our strongest emotional and I guess emotional sites. Okay. So thinking about ayahuasca as something that increases serotonin, and we know that the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors is the most popular form of drugs that we have for depression. It's easy to see that ayahuasca could have an effect on depression. Lisa Palladino researched 6 depressed women in her study who were treated with ayahuasca, and she found that their symptoms were alleviated within 10 days of taking ayahuasca, where antidepressants can take like 3 weeks to a month or never to take effect. So more than just lack of serotonin, depression also is a result of too much cortisol and related stress hormones and impeded function of the hippocampus. So serotonin can promote neurogenesis, which is the birth of new brain cells. And the ayahuasca vine is an MAO inhibitor, which allows for more serotonin to be in the system. So you can see the flooding of serotonin in the system and an increase in sites that can receive it. And I think that this area of ayahuasca, as far as mental health treatment, is one of the more promising ones, because the relationship is kind of direct. And people who drink ayahuasca, it's like the famous hangover effect, where the hangover comes before and the nice part comes after, unlike alcohol or other drugs that you take where you enjoy the feeling and then you have a bad hangover. I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Eddie. Eddie Frexa reported facilitating 3 sessions with ayahuasca for a man who had killed his stepfather and a work supervisor. This is just a one-person case study. Frexa reported that he had meaningful thoughts and deep moral insights, and the patient was confronted with the lies he had told and was understood his role in the pain that he created. 6 months after his ayahuasca treatments, he was able to move from the homeless shelter where he had been living for 3 years, and reported that he had a change of heart about a lot of things in his life. And Frexa says that aggression has been linked to 5-HT, which is serotonin dysregulation. And so he suggests an increase in these receptor agonists can serve to block aggressive impulses. And I don't know where that could go as far as like treating violent people or people who feel that they have a tendency towards violence who might want to be treated on their own, but it's one way of thinking about it. Psychointegration is a term that is used by Michael Wilkelman in his book, Psychointegrator Plants. And it's a theory that the brain works in modularly, so that you have sections that are responsible for different areas. And some of them can be blocked off from each other. Some of them, things like, for example, things you don't like to think about can be pushed into another area where you don't have to think about them. And when you take ayahuasca, it integrates the modules, which forces some of the parts to come in contact with parts that they weren't aware of or didn't know about. So the process that happens, as he's saying, with it's not just with ayahuasca, he's talking about with psychedelics in general, is that the people who are being integrated have very strong experiences where that's what makes them strong experiences, because they're bringing together parts of themselves that they didn't fit together before. Cross-modular awareness, they talk about, if you like your sight and your hearing, things that happen to that can get mixed because everything's getting pushed together during the ceremony. Emotional awareness may be forced as the mind seeks to integrate its experiences. And there's a difference that was cited in this book, which is the difference between emergence and emergency. And emergence is when you're having one of these experiences and you go on to integrate it, and an emergency is where you stop short of integrating it, and so you just simply are aware of something in yourself you never knew about before. You could freak out about it, but hopefully you will integrate it. One of the things that I focused on my dissertation, which was on gay people and ayahuasca use, was on identity transformation. And to me, that's one of the strongest things that ayahuasca is. I've seen it do. Changes in perceived identity can be healing for ayahuasca ritual participants. Participants in rituals may come to see themselves as having a mission, and I have seen that in many people. After drinking, they change the course of their life, either to revolve more around ayahuasca or to revolve more around humanistic concerns. Feelings of inclusion in ritual ayahuasca groups, including churches and shamanic circles, provide mental health benefits beyond those provided by the psychedelic tea. So the effect of many of the studies that are done on the UDV and Santo Daime also have to take into consideration that people like to be in close-knit groups. They get benefits from having a cohesive community, especially a spiritual community that's sharing something, and sharing something as intense as an ayahuasca experience. In the United States, there's the factor of it being illegal, or elsewhere, in Europe, etc. And so that also creates a feeling of bonding and inclusion and loyalty. And those things can lead to increased mental health. So taking the ritual aspect out of the ayahuasca experience, so far, it hasn't really been done to study, because if you take that out, you have to, for example, you would be giving ayahuasca to someone in a hospital to see how it affects them. I predict you're going to get a very different result. Because it's also many times specified in the research that it's the ritual use of ayahuasca, not just the taking of it. Finally, dropping the mask, leading to the healthy aspect of living life authentically and having self-acceptance. And that's something I found in my research too, was all done with all gay people, but two of the people, it was only 16 people, two of the people reported that they came out to their families as a result of taking ayahuasca when they decided that they needed to be authentic. Benny Shannon, I don't know if it's pronounced Shannon or Shannon. Sorry? Shannon, okay. Benny Shannon. He has an article coming out in a book that is coming out actually today. It's called Ayahuasca y Salud, and it's in Spanish, but and it's by Giancarlo Buzo and Beatriz Lavachi. This is an article from there where he talks about the psychology of ayahuasca and kind of goes through different things that can provide positive psychological benefits. So the first one is, he says, vomiting induces humility, because you're on your knees and you're out of control, and whoever you think you are, you have to bow down. except if you're Beyonce, of course. And later in the sessions, happiness and relaxation predominate. Simply having blissful experiences can be therapeutic. Experiences of gratitude and eternity tie into spiritual insights on identity. Overcoming fear instills feelings of accomplishment. Metaphorical parables teach lessons as needed by drinkers. That's in visions. And scenes may be enacted in visions, allowing potential options to be felt and explored in a very realistic way. People will spontaneously enter into deep analysis of their lives. Spiritual influence and musical participation are also healing in this context. And music is found in every ayahuasca ceremony, different kinds of music, but it's always considered to be healing, it's always considered to be sacred. The UDV did some studies, and the UDV is very concerned with trying to get legalized and trying to be a respected religion, and it is the religion, the ayahuasca religion, that's legalized the most in the United States, has legal permission in all of the United States to use. And they're often sponsoring studies to prove how good it is. So they sponsored a study with 15 people who drank huasca, as they call ayahuasca, and 15 control subjects. And they found that the UDV members were found to have greater stoic rigidity versus exploratory excitability, greater regimentation versus disorderliness, greater reflection versus impulsivity, greater uninhibited optimism versus anticipatory worry, and greater gregariousness versus shyness with strangers. And I read that, and some of the things didn't sound that great to me, because stoic rigidity doesn't sound like much fun. And I wonder if these results, like this is with the UDV, so I practice with the Santo Daime, much more, there's singing, there's dancing, moving around, it's just a different experience. And I wonder if these results are more related to the UDV's very calm and proper way of conducting themselves. Ayahuasca's effect on consciousness may be responsible for some of its overall uplifting effects. EEG studies show states similar to meditation in brainwaves during ayahuasca ingestion. Transpersonal experiences recontextualize daily life as sacred or in preparation for sacred activities. That's like people in shamanic practice will be on dietas for a year or several months at a time, getting ready to to have sacred experiences and to encounter the sacred through their ayahuasca experiences. And like in Santo Daime, there's a calendar that has ceremonies arranged, across long, intense ceremonies that take a lot out of people to engage in them. And so your world can start to be defined by the ayahuasca ceremonies that you want to participate in. And there could be some criticism of that, but there's also just people leading a more sacred life in general. Death and rebirth experiences can provide initiation into healthier mental patterns. So death and rebirth are something that many people have reported when they drink ayahuasca. They feel like they're dying, and it's reassuring to know it's not a lethal drug, but I have heard many people say that they thought they were going to die. And they're so happy to be alive. So the most famous of its effects, mental health effects, are ayahuasca's effect on addiction. Studies by Fabregas et al., Mabit, and Leister and Prickett. And there's other ones too, but these are the ones I'm going to be quoting from. There's a place in Peru that some people might have heard of called Tacuasi. And there, Jacques Mabit is, who's a French doctor, Catholic. He practices Catholicism mixed with indigenous healing to combat addictions. So we'll do exorcisms and give people ayahuasca. Research on ayahuasca using populations, including the UDV and Santo Daime, are more common than shamanic users because there are ceremonies on predictable days. There's a community of people living usually in the town, And shamanic users are more spread out and more itinerant, and so it's been harder to do research on shamanic groups. I want to mention Gabor Mate working in Canada, and there's some presenters who will have more to say about that, working with the indigenous people in Canada, which had to stop as a result of the government. Dietas can aid in curbing habits. So during a dieta, people are advised to give up salt and sugar, spices, sex, and the people that I talked to doing my research on gay people also use dietas to overcome sex addiction, watching pornography, and other people use them like for weight loss and other things that, you know, they wanted to have a formal way, and it's a lot of support from people who are also on dietas, trying to enhance their ayahuasca experiences. Fabregas found better mental health in ayahuasca users than in control subjects in a study he did on, 57 psychodynamic drinkers, some in the jungle and some in the cities, and then a control group that actually they looked better than. Their drug use was lower, and their other mental health that's not related to drug use was higher, was better. So Leister and Prickett published this theory of ayahuasca and addiction in 2012. The first part of it is biochemical, and this is another aspect I didn't talk about, but ayahuasca reduces mesolimbic dopamine, reducing action in the pleasure reward system. So while it increases the serotonin, it's reducing the dopamine, and dopamine is one of those things that does make you feel happier, and especially when you get a reward. And if you're an addict, the reward is usually the drug that you're taking, and that makes you happy. So it reduces the happiness that you get from taking your drug. And physiologically, they say it changes the brain's reward systems due to dopaminergic changes, changing the actual pathways in the brain. Psychologically, they claim it resolves trauma through psychedelic insights, and then it has the aspect of transcendence, so people have peak experiences that can be life-changing, like just having one experience that can change your life. That's reported. One more study I want to talk about is Erickson et al. This was a more general study on just the mental health of ayahuasca users. They found that people who take it are interested in self-development, seek change, and are willing to suffer for it. And these are, I should say, these are Westerner people, not the indigenous people. Painful childhood memories and frightening imagery were followed by experiences of bliss and oneness with the universe. A period of reflection followed, and they said that a lot of times the mark between the frightening imagery and the blissful experiences was when someone would vomit. Expanded worldview and new orientation to life were often cited results of ayahuasca use. Greater self-awareness, breaking of negative patterns and addictions, deepening relationships, and feeling of compassion and empathy, and increased creativity. So, several researchers from different places doing different things are all coming up with these very positive effects. And so I'm going to end on talking about the negative effects, psychological effects. So I'm not going to talk about the serotonin syndrome, which is a controversial effect that has not yet actually been witnessed in anyone, but that's separate from the effects I'm talking about. The first negative effect of ayahuasca is what I mentioned before, is psychosis. People have a history of psychosis or are liable to become psychotic. They're advised not to take ayahuasca, and there's been cases of people under the influence of ayahuasca killing other people and also killing themselves. It's not that common, and it always makes the papers, but it does happen. There was a double murder in Brazil of a Santo Daime leader and his son by someone who had attended the church, Then they told him, oh, don't come back because he seemed unbalanced. And he was, and he came back and killed them. But the other negative effect is grandiosity. And this is, as put this way, upon witnessing their exalted self in the context of an ayahuasca experience, a religious fervor and inflated self-image can manifest. And so some people want to lead a church, or they want to tell everybody that we all need to do one thing, or, you know, it's an enthusiasm that comes from, I think it comes from people seeing how beautiful they are under the, you know, blanket of ayahuasca and thinking, I must have to do something about that, and everyone must know. But, you know, in Santo Daime, those people go on to become church leaders. Other places, I don't know how they deal with them, but that's pretty much my presentation, and I can answer questions. I don't think I have time to answer questions, but if you want to ask me questions privately, you can.
You have 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, 10 minutes for questions? Oh, okay. Well, then here I am to answer any questions. Questions? Yes.
So in every instance where the language was treated, that's always actually in a ritual setting? That's not like someone's given some quantity, but they're living a normal life?
Yeah, they've, I don't know of any studies that they've done. They're trying to, what they call lionize ayahuasca. They have, freeze-dry it and make it into pill form so that they can do blind studies, because you can't really give someone a glass and say, oh, you know, 5 people it's ayahuasca, 5 people it's not, and not know that it's the most horrible tasting stuff. You know, so you can't really hide that. So they're trying to make it into freeze-dry so they can do research, but then they're going to have, well, it'll be good because then they'll be able to tell the results that are coming from the ritual and those that are just coming from the chemical. But yeah, they're mostly done with people who are actively using it in rituals. Yeah?
You mentioned that there's long-term positive effects, but you also mentioned that the people were engaging in many rituals, like it was, like they are like constantly getting doses of this and having effects from it. It isn't something that is like turned out like over a year after using it.
Yeah, well, some people, the ones that they, many of the studies are done on people in Santo Daime and UDV who have a regular schedule where they drink it, you know. There are people who drink it with shamans, go down for 3 months and come back and don't drink it again for several months. But those studies are not on those people, so I don't know. It's more on the regular that could change the plasticity of the brain. Yeah?
Since there's different, brews of ayahuasca depending on the tradition, do you know from the neurochemistry what piece of the medicine is enacting these sort of increased, you talked about dopamine and serotonin and whatnot. Is it the DMT? Is it the...
Well, both have effect, the harmine from the vine and the DMT from the plant.
Mm-hmm.
The harmine from the vine has been, I think, underestimated as far as its healing ability and what role it plays, because people often say, oh, have you taken ayahuasca? Well, I smoked DMT and I had this experience, and it's completely different from this experience because it doesn't have the harmine. And in South America, Indian tribes use just the ayahuasca vine without adding anything to it. Some tribes were doing that. So I forgot how to answer your question. What was your specific question I was describing?
Well, I was just trying to assess what specifically in the medicine
so the other thing
is leading to these positive mental states.
Right, so the other thing I want to say is that all of the studies that I'm quoting also are just leaves and vine. And shamans often add other things that have all different effects, but the ones that the churches all use, just that combination. So, and again, the studies with shamans would have to take that into consideration if they're going to be looking at what goes into the healing aspect of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
It's not a question so much as an observation that you might elaborate on. Many of the points that you made explain the results of the social health of the community at Ciudad de Mapia that the Brazilian government found on its many investigations. I think there have been 3, and at least the last 2 amongst their various reported observations was that there was great social cohesion in the society, and everybody was essentially happy. So you were talking about the effects of the harmine and of the DMT at stimulating this and suppressing this and creating long-term effects, and the bonding of the ritual setting and the intentional community. So there are many elements, both biochemical and psychological, it seems to me, that contribute to a healthier society overall when everybody's taking it, when they're on the same page. If you have any comments on that, I'd like to hear them. But that's certainly, in studying about the Brazilian investigation by the government, this is an outstanding feature that I think really, I'm sure that UDV touts that, and I imagine Santo Daime does too.
They do, but it's a very secondary thing, because having happy groups of people it's not a specific goal of the government to like shut them down, but having people who take chemicals are. So we could I'm sure there are studies of small cohesive groups of people who practice a religion together. That is the same effect, is that people who practice religion in a group that, if they're not forced into it, they're voluntary, they are healthier people. So that's not controversial. And churches, that's their main attraction. Not their main attraction, but for churches, regular Christian churches, I think that's, meet friends, and we all like the same thing, we all believe the same thing. So yeah, I think that does help a lot. And that also the groups aren't doing anything nefarious, or they're not engaging in bad things, so that's good too. But I think it's hard to tease out what is the effect of ayahuasca. Like this, ayahuasca seems to make people more gregarious, so then maybe their group experiences are better, and they make people more authentic. Then people will have deeper relationships within those communities. So what effect does ayahuasca have on just the simple building of the community? It's put together by more authentic people who are more, So it's an interesting question, and I don't know how to get that data out of there,
Sounds like a postdoctoral fellowship to me.
Okay, well, thank you very much.